Thyroid is very delicate tissue, and we live in a very toxic environment. So the water we drink, the air we breathe, the food we eat, we put toxins in our body all the time. And the thyroid is very sensitive, so it's going to pick up those toxins and start not working as well as it should. So there are a lot of people dealing with hypothyroidism. Also, stress can lead to it, hormonal imbalances. So there's so many things going on that can affect the thyroid function. So many people are dealing with it, but they just don't know that they're dealing with it because the doctors aren't really doing all the tests needed.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Teresa. I'm a mom. I'm a health nut and a wife to a cancer fighter. And today I'm talking with Dr. Jake of Integrative Medica about hypothyroid, whether or not you have it, what your doctors might be missing, all of it. You're not going to want to miss it. Dr. Jake, how's it going?
It's going really good. I'm really excited to be able to talk about hypothyroidism. It's something that's very much underdiagnosed, and really a lot of doctors don't know how to diagnose it very well. They just look for basic tests. So a lot of people go suffering with hypothyroidism without really getting appropriate treatment. So it's going to be really fun to talk about that today.
Yeah. And you were mentioning to me when we were talking about this prior to recording that like you see this all the time in your office. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think this is such a common problem that keeps coming up in people's lives?
So the reason why it's so common is the thyroid is very delicate tissue, and we live in a very toxic environment. So the water we drink, the air we breathe, the food we eat, we put toxins in our body all the time. And the thyroid is very sensitive, so it's going to pick up those toxins and start not working as well as it should. So there are a lot of people dealing with hypothyroidism. Also, stress can lead to it, hormonal imbalances. So there's so many things going on that can affect the thyroid function. So many people are dealing with it, but they just don't know that they're dealing with it because the doctors aren't really doing all the tests needed
Right.
to help them.
So you see a lot of people every day, and many of them do have hypothyroid issues. What's an example of somebody maybe that has come in that you have been able to treat? Can you tell us a little about a success story with treating hypothyroid?
So I'm just going to talk about a recent patient that I was just seeing. I see hundreds of patients all the time with this condition. But so I had Talia come in. She was dealing with a lot of fatigue. She wasn't able to really accomplish the things that she wanted throughout the day. She used to exercise all the time. She was very active. She was able to spend time with her kids, do her work out, go mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding, hiking, etc. All these outdoor activities. She wasn't really able to do those, so she was really getting depressed because she wasn't able to do the things she loved. So we sat down and did thorough history. And then when I was listening to her, I was like, one of the big things that's going on is it looks like she has a thyroid issue. She had been to a lot of different doctors, but they hadn't specifically diagnosed her with hypothyroidism. The reason why is because most doctors, what they do is they look at just the TSH. Maybe they look at a total T4. Sometimes they look at a free T4. So that's not really looking at things enough. That's looking at just the pituitary gland sending a message, which is TSH, to the thyroid hormone, telling it, hey, make some T4. And then most doctors think, okay, there's a feedback loop. That means that the TSH is going to be a good modulator if you are making enough thyroid or not. From vast education, postgraduate training in the thyroid, seeing thousands of patients with thyroid, I can tell you that's not absolutely true. Sometimes it's true, many times it's not. So I pick up people that have normal TSHs, but they have hypothyroidism all the time, because you really need to not just look at how the pituitary is working. We need to look at if the thyroid's actually making T4, if T4 is actually converted to T3, if that T4 is being converted to reverse T3, and we're diving more into that later in the episodes. But with her, we did a detailed testing to really identify what was going on with her thyroid. I found out that she was having a conversion issue. She wasn't converting her T4 to T3, which is extremely common. So we gave her a T4, T3 compounded medication. We also gave her some nutrients to help support her thyroid gland, and she started feeling much better with doing that. So we helped her thyroid, and then we helped with many other things, and she started getting her energy back, her focus, concentration, able to really do all the activities she loved again.
That is awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear more on how we can apply, a lot of what to our own lives, especially since it's such a common issue. So I can't wait. In the meantime, we do need to remind our audience before we jump into all of that, that this is just a podcast, right, Dr. Jake?
Yeah, so this is just a podcast. I'm not really going to make any specific diagnoses or really telling you how you should treat yourself. So if you have any questions, concerns, or really want to get a thorough investigation in your health, give us a call and visit our website at integratedmedica.com. Find our number, give us a call and set up an appointment with me or someone on my team.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dr. Jake. So before we jump into everything, would love to know what's going on with you. What's new in your life?
I recently had a company party. We haven't done that for a while. So it was a lot of fun to get together with my staff and their family. Had been a really long time. And some of them, the staff, I'd never met their family, their wife, kids, husbands. So it was really a lot of fun to be able to meet with them. We just went to a little small cabin close to the house. Actually, my mom owns. She lives at. So it was a lot of fun to go there and hang out there. We made a meal. We had a meal called chicken Milanese, which was a great gluten-free breaded chicken over some arugula and fennel with a mustard sauce. So it was really great. And we formed a lot of good relationships while we were there. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad to hear that as a naturopath that you weren't serving, pizza and hot dogs at your company party. That's awesome. It's a good example
Hey,
of a good
they
healthy
would be all
meal.
natural, so they would be good.
Now, I imagine
Just
this was something that you haven't had in a while just because of like the pandemic, or is that what was stopping any of these gatherings?
I usually just don't think of really getting these gatherings together. I mean, we're not a huge medical clinic. I mean, we have 5 or 6 employees, so I just never really think of it. We started talking to my receptionist and thought of it that it would be a really good idea to really get together and really get to know each other besides just in the clinical setting. So it's one of our first times we did it, so it was good to do.
That's very wise of your receptionist. A little feminine touch, I imagine, since I know her, and I know a bit about her. So great. Well, okay, let's dive into it because I know our audience is definitely eager, especially with the symptoms, because these are symptoms that we are seeing people have all the time. Dr. Jake, what are some common issues people might be feeling if they have hypothyroid?
So if you have hypothyroidism, some of the common symptoms are obviously the first one is fatigue. You might be noticing that you start getting a little brain fog, not able to think of things as well, not as clearly, not able to focus as well. Also, you might be getting a little bit of constipation. You might get dry skin. You might start gaining weight. You might start noticing that your muscles start to ache. You might start noticing certain sleep issues. Your hair might start falling out. So that's a quick list of some things that might be related with hypothyroidism, but there are a lot of other things possibly related to it too.
One of the ones that you said that stood out, because I know a few people that have been diagnosed with hypothyroid, is that weight gain aspect. It seems to me, at least, in my experience, when I'm talking with friends and family and so forth that have been diagnosed, that seems to be often like the one of the most common signs of it. Would you agree on your like the medical side of that is like one of the bigger, most common symptoms?
It's extremely common to see people that are having difficulty losing weight, or they always had an easier time losing weight. It wasn't a really big issue, and now it's really hard for them to lose weight. They have to work out more, or even if they work out really hard, they're not losing the weight. But I will say this: that I see people with hypothyroidism that aren't chubby.
Okay.
They're normally fit, skinny, and really healthy. So looking. So it's not always weight gain is going to be associated with hypothyroidism. It is a very common symptom, and that's kind of where we go to. And this is one thing too: is a lot of doctors see someone and they think they can't have hypothyroidism because they aren't overweight.
Hmm.
And they're missing a big thing with doing that because I diagnose people all the time with hypothyroidism and they're not overweight. But to reiterate, yeah, it's a common symptom, but if you're not overweight, you can still have hypothyroidism.
Okay. So taking a look at these symptoms. Now, you gave a long list. Is there like a protocol, like you need to have, 5 of the 10 symptoms in order for it to be plausible? Like, what would you say about how many of these symptoms someone might have if indeed they have hypothyroid?
I don't always just look at those symptoms. I mean, if someone's fatigued and they have some brain fog and they don't have any of the other symptoms, I'm still going to do a detailed look at their laboratory work and
Okay.
see what their labs are telling me. So if I see that their labs are telling me that their thyroid's not working as well as it should, I'm going to go after it. So, but I at least need to see 2 or more. I'm not just going to say fatigue and you have hypothyroidism. But if the labs are showing something, I might lean towards that. And I might give some nutrients to help support it.
And I imagine that depending on when you catch it, right, in the level of hypothyroidism, I imagine there's different levels of how bad it can be. You might have fewer symptoms earlier on and more symptoms later on if it gets worse, correct?
That's definitely true. So you could
Okay.
start out just with mild fatigue, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. That's
Right.
yes, for
So
sure.
I like the idea of like, hey, if you're feeling this, like go in because if it's just the beginning stages, it might be something that you can nip in the bud real quick before it gets
Mhm.
worse. So if they were to go and see a doctor, what kind of labs should they request in order to really get that thorough picture that you're talking about?
So yeah, if you're going into your doctor and you really think you have hypothyroidism, I would drill them and be like, "Hey, I've really done a lot of research on thyroid. I really want to order these labs." So it'd be a TSH. They're already going to do that one. It would be a free T4. They might do that one. It would be a free T3, then a reverse T3, and autoimmune antibodies and thyroglobulin antibodies. Those last three likely that your doctor doesn't order. And here's the kicker too, is I tell my patients all the time for insurance purposes or things like that, hey, here's some labs I want you to do. Let's have you go to your primary care and let's give you get your labs done. And sometimes they're prideful enough and they won't even order some of these tests. They're like, oh, why am I ordering these tests? I don't even know what to do with these tests. So it's a waste of time and I'm not going to do it. So you have to be really a stickler with your doctor and be like, hey, these are really what I want to know. And I really want to see if I do have a hypothyroid issue. So if you really could please order these, that would be great.
Now, what's the reason why? Is it because insurance won't cover those last 3? Is it a lack of understanding, like a thorough education in thyroid? What's the causing the resistance for some
Yeah.
doctors to
Yeah.
do some of these labs?
So sometimes in certain insurances won't cover these more specialized type of tests. Your insurance plan might only cover certain tests and don't cover other tests, and then it's going to go towards your deductible, etc. So, but the biggest reason is they just don't know what it is telling them. I mean, they do know what the thyroid antibodies are doing, but if they show that someone has Hashimoto's with elevated antithyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin, they're not going to treat you any different. They're going to treat you exactly the same. They're going to give you the same medication if you have elevated TSH and Hashimoto's or not. So they're like, there's just no point to order that test. So I'm not going to order that test. And they don't know
Interesting.
what to do if there's a elevation of reverse T3. They don't know what that means. And also low T3. Okay, your T4 looks normal, but your T3 is low. What does that mean? I only give T4 anyways. I never prescribe anything but T4. So those are some reasons behind it. They just really don't know how to approach the thyroid detailed. They know how to treat a really severe hypothyroidism case, but not the more mild or moderate hypothyroidism.
Okay. Interesting. Now, okay, let's say they got their labs, whether or not their doctor wanted to do them or not, they have them now. What are some common flags might they see in their labs that would suggest they've got a hypothyroid issue?
So this is going to get pretty complicated, and probably the listeners are going to be like, "Whoa, this is way over the top." But what I'm going to do is, okay, you're going to have a high TSH is what's going to show up. And how I look at it doesn't mean it has to be out of the range. There's a very broad range. It goes from like zero 0.5 or zero 0.4 all the way up to 4.5 to 5. That's a huge range in there. So what that is just looking at is, okay, this is the normal. And I call it the sick norm. So all these labs that they get these ranges on are from people that have done labs and they come up with a normal laboratory marker based on all these people that have sent in labs. But that doesn't necessarily tell us what is the ideal level. So what I like to see is I like to see the number at 2, maybe 3, depending on what the other numbers do. But I like to usually see it at 2 or lower on the TSH. A lot of other doctors need to see it at least above a 5 to even say that you have any thyroid issue at all. If it's 4.9, you're still good. You don't have any hypothyroidism. That's not how I look at it, and I look at it much more in detail. We also do a free T4. I like a free T4, not a total T4, because total T4, it could be all bound to protein. It's not actually active on your cells. So a free T4 is what's actually going to get into the cells and actually do something. I like to order a free T3. Again, same reason why I don't order a total T3 is because it's all bound to proteins. I want to see what's actually going to be able to get into the cells. And T3 is what's actually active on the cells. T4 does very little. It does a little bit on helping the metabolism, helping the thyroid do what it does. But T3 is really the big one. So if you're not converting your T4 to T3 very well, you're going to have hypothyroidism. Everything's going to look normal on your normal laboratory work where you had with the other doctor, but you're not making enough T3 and you have all hypothyroidism issues because T3 is what does all the work. And then what can happen is we like to order what's called the reverse T3 also. that get elevated when the T4 is getting converted a lot to reverse T3, and then reverse T3 doesn't do anything. There could be multiple reasons why that happens. Antithyroid peroxidase antibodies and then thyroglobulin antibodies to rule out autoimmune thyroiditis like Hashimoto's, because I do treat people with Hashimoto's completely different than someone that doesn't have Hashimoto's.
And I know we're going to be talking about Hashimoto's on another episode, and we'll make sure and have that link in the description box and at the end of this video if you're interested in it. So going back through to kind of recap what I just heard you say, some possible flags that people might see in their labs that would suggest hypothyroid would be a high TCH, a low T3, or a low T4, or low both of them, but it doesn't have to always be both.
Mm-hmm.
An
Yeah.
possibly an elevated autoimmune markers, and I don't. You gave some pretty big words there, Dr. Jake, but there's
And
two
then
of those
other
autoimmune
indicators,
markers that you meant, and they
I
could
think,
be
yeah.
elevated,
Yeah.
and then maybe an elevated reverse T3.
Yeah.
Now, would they
Yeah.
need all of these to be flagged in order for them to be to have hypothyroid?
No, it's just going to be one is going to tell me that hypothyroidism is going on. If you have elevated TSH, that's going to tell me you have something going on. Low free T4, low free T3, just each individual one. If you have Hashimoto's, let's say all your thyroid's looking great, but you have Hashimoto's, guess what? If you don't do anything about the Hashimoto's, the thyroid is going to get worse, and then you're going to have to get on thyroid hormone. Any indicator I see is going to make me treat your thyroid.
Okay. That makes sense. You kind of already touched a bit on what traditional doctors miss often and, how integrative looks at other aspects. So looking at solutions, right? What are some possible solutions to hypothyroid that as an integrative doctor you look at and consider as part of their protocol?
So it all depends on what's going on with the thyroid. So let's say you have your T3 is looking okay, your T4 is getting converted to T3 sufficiently. We might give you just levothyroxine or T4, something like that, which is what most doctors prescribe, and that's what they always prescribe. 99% they prescribe a T4 type of medication, levothyroxine, Synthroid, etc. That's what they're going to prescribe. So if your T4 is converting to T3 effectively, that will be a good prescription for you. So I do prescribe that if I see that. But let's say I see that your T4 is not going to be converted very well to T3. Your T4 looks fine, but your T3 looks horrible. So I might prescribe T3 by itself. But let's say your T4 looks low, but it's just not converting very well to T3, or let's say your T4 and T3 are both low, I'm going to give you a T4, T3 compounded medication, or I'm going to give you a glandular extract like Naturopathic, NP thyroid, Armor thyroid, something like that to help support your thyroid in that case. But let's say your T4 looks awesome, it's high, and then your T3 is really low, I'm going to always give you T3 by itself. I'm not going to give you more T4. Let's say then you have Hashimoto's with low thyroid. I'm going to be then working at treating the autoimmune condition, which we've talked about autoimmunity a lot, and we're going to save that for our next episode. But that's going to go down a whole different rabbit hole of really calming down that inflammatory response happening in the thyroid and treating your thyroid with certain medications. Now, let's say your thyroid doesn't look really bad. It looks like you have a little bit of issue, a little bit of low T4, T3. Your TSH maybe is at a 3, maybe a 4, but your T4, T3 numbers look pretty good. I'm going to then say, hey, we don't really need to get on any medication right now. We can support this just with some nutrients. So let's give you some maybe iodine, which I'm going to check to see if they are low before I give iodine. Because if you take too much iodine, you're going to suppress the thyroid. If you take too little iodine, you're going to suppress the thyroid. So it's about having a perfect balance of the iodine. So before I prescribe that order, see where the iodine level is. But many people do need iodine. Then I'm going to give some selenium, maybe some B12, some magnesium, maybe some herbs to help support the thyroid function to get the thyroid working. So that's just a quick rundown of kind of how I approach the thyroid.
Now, what about anything like as far as diet? Does diet play a role in improving thyroid function?
Yes and no. I mean, there are certain, like I hear this from my patients all the time. If they start looking on Dr. Google, it's like, I'm eating way too many cruciferous vegetables. I'm eating like way too much kale. I'm eating too much broccoli. You have to be pounding the kale and broccoli to be able to suppress your thyroid. I mean, if you're doing smoothies and you're really putting tons of kale in there and you're doing it every day, yeah, you might suppress your thyroid a little bit. But these things can help your thyroid and all that too. So So I just wanted to put that little point in there about dietary things, because I hear this a lot and they're really scared of eating all these really healthy foods because they think it's going to suppress the thyroid. So you can eat these healthy foods, just if you're just eating too many of them, it can be a problem. And that's like getting really high doses of these certain nutrients, certain foods. So dietarily, it depends if you have Hashimoto's or not. Let's say you just have a functional hypothyroidism. I am going to want you to eat a good, healthy diet, but I'm not going to be able to. I'm not going to say you need these certain nutrients or not. Now, let's say you're not eating any iodine. You're eating salt without any iodine, or you live in a place away from the ocean where we don't have a lot of iodine in our soil. You probably are going to be low in iodine, so you need to try to supplement iodine or get foods that do have iodine in there to help support the thyroid. But let's say you have Hashimoto's, we're going to have to find out your food allergies, work on healing up your gut, decrease inflammatory foods, on and on, if that's the case.
You know, that's
Which
interesting that you bring up about the iodine because, I know it's gotten kind of trendy, to like, oh, take like use Himalayan salt, use sea
Mhm.
salt. A lot of health minded people are trying to get away from table salt and use salts that have more minerals and are considered healthier. But I know that table salt is iodized. So on the specific note of iodine, like what would you suggest to somebody who is not using table salt? I mean, is that even like a wives' tale that you should use table salt to get enough iodine? Or is there enough iodine in just the regular foods that we're eating? Should they get
So
iodine added to their Himalayan salt?
some health officials way back in the early 1900s or somewhere around there decided that a lot of the population was low in iodine. So they decided, hey, we need to start putting it in our food supply. So they started adding it to salt. So that's why we have it there. But it's been a problem too, is because people are getting way too much iodine now and suppressing their thyroids by eating tons of table salt, and that's all they're eating is iodine. So I'm not saying that you need to eat the table salt to get your iodine level. I think it's a fine balance because many people are getting too much. That's why it can be really difficult, and you need to go to a doctor that actually understands this and really get your iodine specifically checked to know if you are getting sufficient amount of iodine in your diet currently, or do you need a supplement and get some iodine. A good way is a gentle way, and you might be eating too much, is like eat some kelp chips or something like that. That's a gentle way to get iodine, and it's usually a good healthy way of getting enough iodine in your diet.
It's funny that you say that because I don't use table salt. We use Himalayan. And I started tripping out one day. I'm like, wait a second. Are my kids getting enough iodine? Because,
Mhm.
we're not eating that. So they discovered seaweed. They just eat it.
Yeah, love
You
that
can buy
stuff.
this big thing at Costco and they're like
Yeah.
seaweed chips. They eat it up.
Mhm.
I don't care for it. But now I just buy it for them because in my
Mhm.
mind, I'm like, okay, I'm helping their iodine.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I like it. Don't let them like eat a whole package every day. I mean, they probably are getting
No.
too much iodine at that
Okay.
point.
That's good to know,
About
right?
balance. It's about balance in all things. So if you're really like your kids love the kale chips and they're eating like a package every day, that's going to be a big problem, and we're going to have to fix that.
All right. So no, not too many chips as far as the seaweed goes. I think we just do it like once, twice a week. So good to know.
Awesome.
So as far as differences, kind of closing this out with how you would be treating versus a traditional doctor. You were talking a little bit with me earlier before we recorded this about, doctors giving Synthroid and how that may not necessarily be like the best option. And you've touched on it already a little bit, but I want to be very specific. People who are new to this, they may not have a lot of these complicated, scientific words like T3 and T4 and all this other stuff, but they might hear Synthroid. They might hear this doctor bring up Synthroid. Talk to me a little bit about Synthroid, how that works in the traditional realm and where they might want to explore other options.
I'm sure the majority of the people listening to this, if they are dealing with thyroid issues, have been put on Synthroid or currently taking Synthroid, or if they've come to another doctor that understands the nuances of it, they're on something else. But so that's what the conventional 90% of doctors who are going to put you on is some type of Synthroid or some other T4 medication. And they might modify that if you tell them you don't feel good with Synthroid, they might change a different type of T4 medication. But they usually never get like a glandular extract or T3 by itself or a compounded T4 T3. It's because that's just not how they were trained, and they don't really know how to go after it in that way. So how I approach it is going to be quite different.
Right. So to be a little combination, it seems like, of a few possible things. So now
Mhm.
once they start going on a protocol like you suggest with a combination of these, nutritional aspects and possible compounded aspects, how long can someone expect before they start feeling better?
So if we get the right dose for you, you're probably going to feel better within a week.
That is
It's really
awesome.
quick. Now, I will say, when people have thyroid issues, many times there's all kinds of other things going on. So they might not feel all the way better. We might get your thyroid regulated, but you have all these other things kind of sitting back that we need to take care of, and we need to take care of those things before you start better, feeling better. But if the thyroid's the only thing going on, you're going to feel good real quick.
That's great. And I know we're going to be talking about that in future episodes as far as, thyroid connecting to autoimmune issues, to cortisol, to adrenals. Like there's so many other things that might be happening in the body that it can be a part of. Now, asking this, if someone doesn't take care of their thyroid and they're just putting up with it, they don't want to see a doctor because, oh, I don't have insurance, or I don't want to, you have to pay for all of the treatment. It's going to cost so much money. I'll just put up with it. What are some possible dangers for somebody like that who's putting it off, not wanting to see a doctor, not wanting to get this treated?
Some of the dangers are that you are going to start losing your hair.
Okay.
People usually like their hair, and it's not fun. You might start gaining weight. Usually people don't like to gain weight. You might get really constipated, and then you're not going to eliminate your bowel very well, and then toxins are going to start accumulating. Then you might start forgetting things, and that won't be fun. So there's this, you feel horrible, and you just won't be able to function how you really should without getting the appropriate amount of thyroid, or getting the nutrients or herbs that are needed to support the thyroid.
And I know from what I've seen, I know that we're going to be doing a future episode here, going over some of the things that you're treating me for, that these labs they're not very expensive. So I know, talking to anybody out there, if your insurance isn't covering it, I highly suggest that you still just do it. It's really not that expensive. And in the end, how you're going to feel after you treat your issue, you're going to get so much energy back and so much productivity back and so much just joy back in your life that it's going to come back monetarily as well in your work and what you're able to just do and enjoy in your life. So it'll be extremely worth it. So as a non-doctor, person to person, just listen, sharing that with an audience who might be concerned about it. Don't let insurance and what they'll cover stop you from getting the labs you need so that you can feel better. Dr. Jake, if they want to talk with you as part of, their health journey, how can they get a hold of you?
So yeah, if I seem like a good fit for you, if I seem like I know the thyroid very well, you can set up an appointment by visiting integrativemedica.com, finding our phone number, and giving us a call, giving my receptionist a call, and set up a visit with me or someone on my team. You could either see us in person, or we could set up a virtual visit and really dive into this for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Jake, for talking with me today about hypothyroid. And if you want to learn more about Hashimoto's or autoimmune conditions and those types of things that might be related to what you're feeling, check out the next video. You're not going to want to miss it. Thanks so much.
Hey, Dr. Jake, thank you for your time today. And if you enjoyed the show, then do us a favor and leave a review. It helps more people to find the show, which could save their life. And remember, this is a podcast and should not replace personalized attention from a medical professional like Dr. Jake. If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder, cancer of any stage, or a life-changing illness, visit our website today and schedule a virtual appointment with one of our doctors who can lead you to a treatment plan in your area. That's integrativemedica.com. Integrative, MEDICA.com.
Thank you for listening to the Integrative Medica podcast with Dr. Jake. To hear past episodes and get alerts for the future, subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting platform and be sure to follow us on YouTube as well. Just search for Integrative Medica with Dr. Jake.